Bangai-o is a fantastic, classic-esque game that any gamer who loves blowing crap up, or classic English lover, owes to themselves to play. It's simplistic enough that someone at any age could beat, however it is tricky enough that you will need to do every level more than once to complete, and there are a lot of levels, 44 of them. Gameplay will explain a bit more. Bangai-o is a superb pick-up-and-play game, and the first couple of levels is nearly perfect in how the difficulty ramps up slightly, in order for you to slowly improve in your performance, as well as become acquainted with the different nuances of the game itself. Basically, all you do is fly around in your tiny, on-screen, mech, and blow the living hell out of things. It plays somewhat like a traditional shooter in that you accrue bombs for every amount of objects you destroy, be it enemies, buildings, or projectiles, using the face buttons of the Dreamcast controller, which allows you to shoot in 8 directions, as opposed to other buttons that would only enable you to shoot in one direction or two. And the bombs make for a truly awesome time, as when they are timed correctly, you will see nothing but a giant wave of destruction that blows up everything on screen. It's a sight to behold, and it puts a great big smile on your face. At the end of the 44 levels, there is a boss that you must defeat. Basically, you can fly through the whole level, and then face the boss without destroying anything, and while many bosses are core bosses, they just sit there for you to shoot at them. The rest are all different in their attack patterns and movement, etc. It makes for a lot of variety, and a very fun time. The story expands on the fun. The Cosmo Gang is a gang headed by a ruthless man named Guy, and they are wanted throughout the universe for fruit contraband, among other crimes. When they invade a planet known as Dan Star, home to many hot-blooded teenagers who love to kill things, one of the teenagers, Ricky, along with his sister, Mommy, take control of a giant mech known as bangai-o, and try to put an end to the Cosmo Gang once and for all. The translation was different depending on where the game was localized, but apart from being an interesting story, it is absolutely ridiculous and hilarious, and as a result, it makes for an awesome time when there are dialogue sequences. 0. Bangai-o has great graphics throughout, though the game is one of the very few Dreamcast games that cannot output VGA, thus we may not be seeing the game at its full potential. Regardless though, while the game is great graphically, some objects in the game, such as the mechs, and other enemies, are not detailed in the slightest, thus you can make out a little blob as the enemies / yourself. Not cool. The backgrounds look superb though, and they have depth to them, in addition to many different colors and textures. Finally, the graphics when your bombs go off are simply stunning. To see that massive circle of missiles fly out from around you is truly a sight to behold. Like with any treasure game, the soundtrack to Bangai-o is simply phenomenal, and all of the music tracks are memorable and catchy. They range from upbeat, heart-pulsing tunes, to rhythmic, groovy themes, and the odd chill song is thrown in as well, not to mention the boss dialogue music is great. The sounds are your usual fare of explosions and metal pieces being damaged, and each is different depending on what you destroy. Ricky and Mommy also have a little bit of dialogue here and there, for when they release bombs, or when they get hit. The sounds are far from a problem in Bangai-o, and they are arguably the highlight of the game. While not super long, Bangai-o will take you some time to complete. Again, there are 44 levels, and not all are a walk in the park, or overly simplistic, thus time must be invested to beat this game. Even when I decided to pick it back up again, it took me over a week to complete the final 37 levels. Bangai-o is a game that will test your mettle. Bangai-o is simply a splendid affair, and I'm thankful that I was able to complete it after struggling with it at first. Between the shooting, the brilliant soundtrack, and the hilarious dialogue, it is no wonder why treasure games such as this are so widely praised and valued. Do yourself a huge favor and pick up this game if you can, you will never regret that decision. Developers like Treasure are relatively few and far between these days. With narrative and cinematic pretensions becoming more and more commonplace in games, titles developed around strong gameplay mechanics are becoming something of a rarefied treat. Content with developing simple, elegantly playable games, Treasure has become known as something of a hardcore gamer's company. Bangai-o serves as a testament to its sensibilities. Originally released for the N64 in Japan under the name Bakuretsu Moteki Bangai-o in 1999, the game was later ported to the Dreamcast with a handful of key tweaks. Both releases garnered the game mild acclaim. In it, you take control of Bangai-o, an archetypal giant robot piloted by a suitably scrappy brother and sister duo, Ricky and Mommy. The game is essentially a free-roaming 2D shooter whose sprites are all rendered at a very small scale. As a result, Treasure has managed to pack copious amounts of carnage into each level, granting them optimum action-to-square-inch ratios. Simply put, the game is ultra-fast-paced, pleasingly varied, and, most importantly, lots of fun. The game's premise is appropriately light. A group of vile space pirates known as the SF Cosmo Gang have been purloining and subsequently hawking rare space fruit to fund its foul designs. Ricky and Mommy, piloting their mighty mech Bangai-o, as it's called in the US, have made it their business to rout the SF Cosmo Gang from their peaceful sector. You wouldn't glean much of this from the game's cutscenes, though. They're full of delightfully absurd non-sequiturs, and, as a whole, they seem to work more toward an amusing absence of narrative than any real plot development. When they do occur, usually at the end of stage, the cutscenes are brief, mostly hysterical, and totally skippable. Controlling the Bangai-o is a treat. You move it by means of the directional pad, and you can fire its guns in 8 directions by using either the analog stick or the DC's 4 face buttons. Since the Bangai-o can fly, you're free to soar through the game's huge 2D levels, blasting things willy-nilly and collecting fruit. You can switch between Ricky and Mommy on the fly by hitting the left trigger, which grants you access to either of their powerful weapons. When Ricky's at the helm, the Bangai-o fires homing missiles, which unerringly tail their targets. When Mommy's in control, you shoot powerful lasers that rebound off surfaces. Each weapon has its uses, and Treasure has thoughtfully designed sections of levels around the use of each. The game's most interesting mechanic, though, is the Bangai-o's special attack. Holding and releasing the right trigger will cause the Bangai-o to unleash a flurry of missiles or beams whose intensity depends on the immediate level of carnage present. If performed during a relatively calm moment, the effect will be modest. During particularly hectic moments, though, when explosions are prevalent and enemies are everywhere, the effect will be astounding. A literal swarm of projectiles will issue forth from the Bangai-o's frame, which, in all probability, will lay every foe on screen to rest. A handy meter tells you exactly how explosive your current area is, and you'll use this area to strategically execute the screen-clearing super move. Treasure has managed to pack a wide array of gameplay elements into this deceptively simple package. While the primary goal of each level is to blast everything in sight, some levels are designed around strong secondary themes. One level, for instance, has you racing against a gradually disintegrating, destructible wall, running the perpetual risk of being stuck behind it. Another level involves a kind of lock and key gameplay style, forcing you to shoot down certain areas of it to open up others. Each stage, though, is effectively a race against time regardless of complexity. Each has a timer that's constantly ticking. If it runs out, it's curtains for Ricky and Mommy. Every level culminates in a boss fight, all of which are preceded by a cutscene. All in all, most levels prove to be nicely challenging. Considering that the game is 40 levels long and gets a good deal difficult about halfway through, you get the feeling that there's quite a bit of bangai-o to tackle. Bangai-o's production values are admittedly modest. The game's 2D art is simple and utilitarian, and its few graphical flourishes are very no-frills. Still, it's difficult to believe that anyone who plays the game will be disappointed by its lack of visual splendor when playing a game like bangai-o. The images on screen take a back seat to the compelling action that'll consume your attentions. The game's audio production is quite well conceived. Surreal little tunes will flow through at unexpected moments, and a small bit of undubbed voice work really endears you to the game's whimsical themes. Sound effects are suitably explosive, crisp, and sharp. Treasure long ago mastered the art of 2D game design. Bangai-o serves as its only recent evidence of having done so. Dreamcast owners craving a genuinely compelling gameplay experience would do well to check out bangai-o. In an age of thick productions and thin gameplay, bangai-o really has it where it counts, in truly compelling and addictive gameplay.